Welcome to Neighborhood Snafus. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It all started when I noticed something strange happening during my daily walks with my dog Max. Every time I clipped a roll of biodegradable poop bags onto his leash, by the time we got home, they would mysteriously disappear. At first, I assumed I had just dropped them somewhere along the way, but after the third or fourth time, I became suspicious. I started mentally retracing my steps, wondering if there was a pattern or if some freak gust of wind was conspiring against me. That's when my neighbor Karen, yes, an actual Karen in both name and nature, began acting oddly smug whenever I passed by her perfectly manicured yard. She would eye me with this peculiar satisfaction, a knowing smirk that suggested she knew something I didn't. Karen had always been a self-appointed enforcer of unnecessary neighborhood rules, the kind of person who measured grass height with a ruler and issued verbal citations to anyone whose front porch lights didn't match the community aesthetic. But lately, she had been on an eco-friendly crusade, aggressively lecturing anyone who dared to use plastic of any kind. She had even formed a local committee to push for an HOA ban on plastic grocery bags, disposable utensils, and according to her latest tirade, dog poop bags, which she claimed were an affront to the environment, even though mine were labeled biodegradable. One day, after yet another roll of my poop bags vanished mid-walk, I decided to test my theory. I looped the bag holder through Max's leash extra tight, even took a photo of it before leaving the house, just in case I was imagining things. As I passed Karen's house, she was out on her porch, sipping her organic, non-GMO, fair trade chamomile tea, shooting me a smug look as usual. I didn't stop to engage, but I did notice a faint rustling sound behind me, like someone creeping up just out of sight. When I glanced back, there was no one there, just a bush that seemed oddly disturbed. I brushed it off as paranoia until we got home, and sure enough, the bag roll was gone again. This was no accident. Someone was stealing them, and I had a pretty strong feeling about who. The next morning, I took my stakeout to the next level. I attached a tiny tracking tag inside an empty poop bag roll, knowing full well that if my suspicions were correct, the thief would unknowingly take the bait. I also set up my doorbell camera to capture anyone lurking near my property. It wasn't long before my hunch was confirmed. That evening, as I reviewed the footage, there she was, Karen, crouched down behind the bush, waiting for me to pass. The moment I turned the corner, she darted out like a raccoon on a mission, unclipped the poop bag roll with the precision of a seasoned pickpocket, and scurried back to her yard like she had just completed an elite heist. My jaw dropped. This woman, who spent her days policing everyone else's behavior, was out here swiping dog poop bags like some eco-warrior vigilante. But what was her endgame? Did she think she was saving the planet one stolen bag at a time? Was she stockpiling them in her house like some kind of environmental hoarder? I had to find out. So, with my tracking app in hand, I followed the signal. Sure enough, it led straight to Karen's house where I found, get this, a massive trash bin overflowing with stolen poop bags, still neatly rolled in and used. My mind reeled. This wasn't just about some self-righteous vendetta against plastic. This was an obsession. A full-blown, unhinged campaign of petty theft, all in the name of an arbitrary crusade. My hands clenched as I stared at the sheer volume of confiscated rolls. My bags, my neighbor's bags, even some fancy lavender-scented ones that clearly belonged to someone else. Karen had been at this for a while, and she had no intention of stopping. That's when I decided enough was enough. It was time to confront her, but not before setting up the perfect trap to expose her madness to the entire neighborhood. Armed with undeniable proof of Karen's bizarre poop bag heist, I knew I had to expose her. But I didn't want a simple confrontation. I wanted something so undeniable, so embarrassing, that she would have no choice but to admit her ridiculous crime in front of the entire neighborhood. The next day, I put my plan into motion. First, I printed out screenshots from my doorbell cam footage, showing her sneaking behind the bush and swiping my bag roll with the finesse of a seasoned thief. Then, I created a few missing poop bag flyers and stuck them to the community bulletin board and mailboxes around the neighborhood. The headline read in bold, "Wanted, the Great Poop Bag Bandit," complete with a blurred-out image of Karen in action. By noon, the flyers had already become a hot topic. Neighbors gathered around them, whispering, pointing, and speculating. I knew it was only a matter of time before the HOA, who Karen practically controlled, would try to shut it down. Sure enough, that afternoon, I got an angry knock on my door. I opened it to find Karen standing there, her face a deep shade of red, shaking with barely contained fury. "This is slander," she hissed. waving one of my flyers in my face. I don't know what kind of childish game you think you're playing, but I demand you take these down immediately. I crossed my arms, feigning confusion. Slander? Karen, you look an awful lot like the person in that picture. I pulled out my phone and played the doorbell cam footage in front of her. She paled as she watched herself creeping through the bushes, snatching the poop bags with the stealth of a cat burglar. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. I was simply removing non-compliant plastic waste. You're violating my environmental rights. I nearly laughed out loud. Environmental rights? Karen, those bags are biodegradable. Meanwhile, you've been hoarding stolen poop bags like some kind of eco-obsessed raccoon. Care to explain why you have a trash bin full of them? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no excuse came out. She had been caught red-handed. That's when I pulled out my final card. I'd already sent an email to the HOA with my evidence, and right on cue, the HOA president, Mr. Thompson, a no-nonsense retired Marine, walked up the driveway with a group of concerned neighbors. Karen, he said, his voice dripping with disappointment. Is this true? Have you been stealing people's property? Karen straightened her posture, attempting to reclaim some dignity. I was only trying to enforce the higher standard for this community. Plastic is a blight on our neighborhood. I was doing a service. The crowd erupted into murmurs, some annoyed, some outright laughing. One neighbor, Mrs. Gonzalez, whose tiny Yorkie was known for making impressive sidewalk contributions, shouted, Karen, you stole my bags too. Do you know how hard it is to clean up after Princess without them? Another neighbor, Mark, who owned a Great Dane, added, You do realize that you've basically forced some of us to leave giant turds unbagged, right? Because of you, the sidewalks are a minefield. Karen's face turned even redder. She opened her mouth, but before she could try to defend herself, Mr. Thompson shook his head. That's enough. This is a serious violation of personal property. Karen, as of now, you're being removed from the HOA board. The collective gasp from the crowd was almost cinematic. Karen stumbled back, blinking rapidly. You can't do that. I am the... Not anymore, Mr. Thompson said firmly. And if I hear of you harassing any more residents over nonsense, we will press charges. The group nodded in agreement, some even clapping. Karen, realizing she had officially lost, turned on her heel and stomped back to her house, slamming the door so hard that her Save the Planet sign fell off the front porch. The fallout was glorious. Over the next few weeks, a sense of peace returned to the neighborhood. People no longer feared getting fined for the most ridiculous infractions, and the sidewalks remained poop-free, thanks to everyone now having their own bags back. A few neighbors even started making jokes about Karen's downfall, referring to her as the bag bandit or the plastic vigilante. As for me, I got an anonymous package on my doorstep a few days later. Inside was a single roll of lavender-scented dog poop bags with a note. Use them wisely, citizen. No signature, but I had a strong feeling it came from Mr. Thompson. And just like that, order was restored to the neighborhood, and I could finally walk Max without fearing the absurdity of eco-crime.